3 weeks had passed since the ambush on Vareth Ix, and Unibeak woke to find herself in a room more luxurious than anything she had ever seen. Walls were made of something that looked like pearl, but glowed with soft internal light, and the bed beneath her was softer than clouds. And through the window, she could see a city of spires and bridges stretching toward a sky filled with 3 moons. She tried to sit up and found that her body actually cooperated. The wound in her side, reduced to a dull ache rather than the screaming agony she remembered a gentle chime sounded. And moments later the door opened to admit a Sylvari attendant who bowed deeply when she saw Yuna was awake. "Honored guest," the attendant said, "you have awakened. I will inform Her Majesty immediately." "Her Majesty," Yuna repeated, confusion evident in her voice. "Where am I?" "You are on the Sylvari throne world," the attendant explained, "in the Royal Medical Complex. You have been under our care since the rescue." Before Yuna could ask more questions, the attendant had already hurried away. She was left alone with her thoughts and her confusion, trying to piece together what had happened after she lost consciousness in the temple. She remembered the fight, remembered the pain, remembered the Queen's voice commanding her to stay alive after that. There was only darkness. The door opened again, and this time Queen Alindres herself entered the room. She looked different than Yuna remembered. No longer the wounded monarch she had carried through the forest, but every inch the ruler of a galactic empire. Her exoskeleton gleamed with health, and her compound eyes held a warmth that had not been there before. "Sergeant Beak," the Queen said, "it pleases me greatly to see you awake." Yuna tried to stand, some instinct telling her that she should show respect, but Alindres raised a hand to stop her. "Please," the Queen said, "you are still recovering, and I did not save your life only to have you injure yourself through unnecessary formality. You saved my life." Yuna said, "The physicians tell me you used the temple's power to keep me alive until they could operate. You saved mine first." Alindres replied, "Several times, as I recall. I was merely returning the favor." She settled into a chair beside Yuna's bed, a gesture so informal that it would have shocked every noble in her court, but there were no nobles here. Only 2 beings who had survived something terrible together. "What happened after I fell?" Yuna asked. "The signal you sent was received by a patrol fleet that was already searching for the missing convoy," Alindres explained. "They arrived within the hour and drove off the remaining Kethrani forces. Commander Vareth Kaln escaped, but he will not evade justice for long. And the political situation. The hegemony faction that orchestrated the attack has been exposed and condemned by the Galactic Council," the Queen said. "They face severe sanctions and the loss of several key trade agreements. The cost of their failure will be felt for generations." Yuna nodded, absorbing the information. "What about my people?" she asked. "The human delegation." "They have been informed of your survival and your heroism," Alindres said. "Your government has already submitted a formal commendation for your actions, though I suspect they do not yet understand the full extent of what you accomplished." "I did not do anything special," Yuna said. "I just did what needed to be done." The Queen made that clicking sound that Yuna had come to recognize as laughter. "You carried a wounded queen through hostile territory for an entire night," she said. "You fought impossible odds to protect someone who had given you no reason for loyalty. You took a blade meant for my heart without hesitation. And you call this nothing special. It is what any soldier would have done." "No," Alindres said, and there was something fierce in her voice. "It is what a human would do, and that is something entirely different." She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city she had ruled for 10,000 years. "I have lived a very long time, Sergeant Beak, and I have seen many things. I have watched species rise and fall, have witnessed empires crumble into dust, have learned that the universe is vast and often cruel and rarely fair." She turned back to face Yuna. but I have never seen a species quite like yours. You are young and fragile, and your lives burn out so quickly that it seems almost tragic. And yet you accomplish more in your brief decades than some species manage in millennia. We do not have time to waste. Una said simply, perhaps that is it. Alendres agreed, or perhaps it is something deeper. Something in the way you are made that refuses to accept limitations. Refuses to surrender, even when surrender would be the logical choice. She moved back to Una's bedside and did something that shocked the human more than anything else that had happened. She knelt. Tomorrow there will be a ceremony, the queen said. Before the assembled nobles of my court, I will bestow upon you the title of Shield of the Throne, an honor that has not been granted to an outsider in 8,000 years. Your Majesty. I cannot. You can and you will, Alendres interrupted. But that is politics. That is for the benefit of my court and the galaxy at large. What I'm about to say now is only for you. She reached out and touched Una's hand, a gesture of intimacy that meant more in Sylvari culture than words could express. You taught me something in that long night, the queen said. You taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important. You taught me that compassion is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. And you taught me that the measure of a species is not how long they have existed, but what they do with the time they have. She rose and stepped back. Oh, composure returning. I have announced a new policy to my people. Humanity will be recognized as full allies of the Sylvari Queendom, with all the protections and privileges that status entails. Your species will no longer be dismissed as newcomers or accidents of evolution. Because of one night in the forest, Una asked. Because of what that night revealed. Alendres corrected. Because you showed me what humans are when no one is watching, when there is nothing to gain. When the only reason to help is because someone needs it. She moved toward the door, but paused before leaving. Rest well. Sergeant Beak. Tomorrow the galaxy will know your name. But today you should simply heal and know that you have made a difference that will echo through history. She left. And Una was alone again with her thoughts. She looked out the window at the alien city, at the three moons hanging in the unfamiliar sky. And she thought about her brother Junho would have laughed at all of this. At the idea of his sister becoming a hero to an ancient alien empire. But he would have understood some things could not be explained, only demonstrated. She had demonstrated what humans were. And now the galaxy knew it was enough. It had always been enough, and somewhere out among the stars. On worlds that humans had not yet discovered. Species who had dismissed humanity as primitive were beginning to whisper a new truth. The humans were not accidents. They were protectors, and when the darkness came, they would carry you through it. The light from the crystalline staff pulsed through Una's body like liquid fire. And the queen poured everything she had into keeping the human alive. It was not healing in the traditional sense. Sylvari technology did not work that way. But it could slow the bleeding and stabilize the wound long enough for proper medical treatment. If help arrived in time, Alendres had not prayed in 3,000 years. Not since the last great war that had nearly destroyed her queendom. But she found herself praying now. She prayed to the ancestors who had built this temple, to the spirits that her people had worshipped before they understood the science of the universe. To anything that might listen and intervene. The human had earned that much, and Una's eyes flickered open. And for a moment there was confusion in them before recognition settled in. Your Majesty, she whispered, you should not waste your energy on me. Be quiet. Alendres commanded. That is not a request. The ghost of a smile crossed Una's pale face. Yes, ma'am. The sound of engines filled the air outside. The distinctive hum of Sylvari rescue craft descending through the canopy. Moments later, soldiers poured into the temple. their weapons raised and their movements sharp with professional efficiency when they saw their queen kneeling over a bleeding human. They stopped in confusion. "Medical teams," Elendris ordered. "Now. This human requires immediate treatment. Your Majesty," one of the soldiers began. "She is not. She is the reason I am still alive." The queen interrupted. "And if she dies because you hesitated, I will hold you personally responsible. Do I make myself clear?" The soldier saluted and barked orders into his communicator. Within moments, a medical team surrounded Yuna, their equipment humming as they worked to stabilize her wound. Elendris watched them with an intensity that surprised even her. She had ruled for 10,000 years, had seen countless beings live and die, had learned long ago that attachment only brought pain. But this human had changed something. This small, fragile creature who healed slowly and broke easily and died so readily had carried her through the night. Without complaint, had fought impossible odds to protect her, had taken a blade meant for her heart, and had not even hesitated. "Your Majesty," the medical team leader said, "we have stabilized her, but she needs surgery and advanced treatment that we cannot provide here. We must transport her to the flagship immediately." "Then do so," Elendris said, "and ensure she receives the best care our technology can provide." "She is human," the leader said carefully. "Our medical resources are designed for Sylvari physiology. The compatibility may be limited. Then you will adapt them," the queen said. "Is that understood?" The leader bowed deeply and began issuing orders. They loaded Yuna onto a transport stretcher and carried her toward the waiting ships. And Elendris followed close behind. She did not notice the way her soldiers stared at her, the shock in their eyes at seeing their ancient queen so concerned about an alien she did not care. As they lifted off from the temple, Elendris looked down at the unconscious human and felt the weight of what had happened settle over her. She had been prepared to die in that ambush. She had accepted it with the resignation of someone who had lived long enough to understand that even immortals must eventually fall. But this human had refused to accept it. This young creature from a species that her people had dismissed as primitive had looked death in the face and said, "No, not today." And then she had proved it. The flight to the flagship took less than an hour, and Elendris spent every minute of it at Yuna's side. When they arrived, the ship's senior physicians were waiting. A team of the best medical minds in the queendom, hastily assembled at the queen's command. They took Yuna into surgery, and Elendris was forced to wait outside. It was the hardest waiting she had ever done. Hours passed, and the queen refused to leave. Her advisors came with urgent business, matters of state that demanded her attention, and she sent them all away. The Kethrani plot had been exposed, they told her, and the hegemony faction behind it faced severe sanctions from the Galactic Count. Silvarath Keln had escaped, but he would be hunted across every world until justice found him. None of it mattered. All that mattered was the human fighting for her life behind those doors. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lead physician emerged. The surgery was successful, she reported. "The human will live." Elendris felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had not realized she was carrying. "Her injuries," she asked, "were severe, but we were able to repair the damage using a combination of our technology and human medical protocols," the physician said. "She will need time to recover, but she should make a full return to health." "When can I see her?" The physician hesitated, clearly uncertain about the queen's unusual interest in this alien patient. "She is still unconscious from the anesthesia, Your Majesty, but you may see her if you wish." Elendris did not wait for further permission. She entered the recovery room and found Yuna lying on a medical bed, her wounds bandaged and her vital signs displayed on monitors that hummed with quiet efficiencies. The human looked small and fragile, her face pale against the white sheets, her breathing slow and steady, but she was Olivia Lindris reached out through her neural link, the connection that bound her to every Sylvari across the stars. And she sent a message that would echo through the minds of millions. I live. She told her people, I live because of a human. She felt their response. A wave of relief and joy and confusion that washed back through the link they did not understand. Could not understand how one of the primitive newcomers could have saved their ancient queen bud. Alindres would make them understand. Remember this species. She commanded through the link. Remember what they are. They are not accidents of evolution. They are not children stumbling through a universe they do not comprehend. They are something else. Something that we ancient peoples have forgotten how to be. She looked at the sleeping human and felt a smile cross her features. An expression she had not worn in centuries. They are heroes, she said, and the galaxy needs to know it. The medical staff watched in amazement as their queen sat down beside the human's bed and settled into wait. She would be there when Una woke. It was the least she could do for the woman who had carried her through the darkness, and it was only the beginning of the debt she intended to repay. They reached the temple as dawn broke over the forest, pale light filtering through the canopy to illuminate ancient stones covered in symbols that predated human civilization by millions of years. Una had carried the queen through the night without stopping, her legs burning and her lungs aching, and her mind focused on nothing but the next step forward now. She stood at the entrance to the sanctuary and allowed herself a moment of relief. They had made it. The temple complex was vast, a sprawling network of chambers and corridors carved into the living rock of the mountainside. Vegetation had claimed much of the exterior over the centuries, but the structure beneath remained solid, a testament to the engineering skills of the ancient. Sylvari. Una carried the queen inside and found a defensible position near what appeared to be a central chamber. The communication equipment should be deeper in the complex, Alindra said, her voice weak but steady. My ancestors built this place as a refuge in times of war, and they would have included ways to call for aid. Can you walk? Una asked, setting the queen down gently. I believe so, Alindra said. The treatment you provided seems to have stabilized the worst of the damage. She rose unsteadily, her movements stiff and pained but functional. Una handed her a sidearm from her belt, a standard-issue pistol that felt absurdly small in the queen's elegant grip. Can you shoot? Una asked. The queen's mandibles clicked in what Una had learned to recognize as amusement. I ruled an empire before your species discovered fire, Alindri said. I have fought wars that lasted longer than your recorded history. I will take that as a yes. They moved deeper into the temple, Una taking point with her rifle raised, and the queen following close behind. The interior was surprisingly well preserved, the walls covered in murals that depicted scenes from Sylvari history. Una did not have time to study them, but she caught glimpses of battles and ceremonies and moments of triumph that spoke to the glory of this ancient civilization. The communication room was exactly where Alindres had predicted, a circular chamber filled with equipment that looked both impossibly old and strangely advanced. The queen moved to the central console and began working the controls with practiced efficiency. The system is still functional, she said, surprise evident in her voice. I can send a distress signal on emergency frequencies. Do it, Una said, taking up a defensive position at the door. Our friends back there will not stay lost forever. The queen's fingers danced across the console, and a burst of static filled the air before resolving into a steady transmission tone. She spoke rapidly in her own language, her words carrying the authority of 10,000 years of rule. Then she switched to Galactic Standard. This is Queen Alindris of the Sylvari. Queendom, she said. I am at the temple. Sanctuary on Verathix, and I require immediate extraction. Authentication code follows. She rattled off a string of numbers and symbols that meant nothing to Yuna, but presumably proved her identity. Then she stepped back from the console and nodded. The signal is broadcasting, she said. If anyone is listening, they will come. How long until help arrives? I do not know. Alindris admitted. It depends on who receives the signal and how quickly they can respond. It could be hours, or it could be days. A sound from deeper in the temple made them both turn. The echo of movement through ancient corridors. Yuna raised her rifle and gestured for the queen to stay behind her. They found us, she said, or they will soon. The Kethrani commander appeared in the doorway moments later. A tall reptilian figure in black armor with eyes that burned with cold satisfaction. He was not alone. And Yuna counted at least a dozen soldiers spreading out behind him that covered the exits. Queen Alindris, the commander said, his voice carrying a hissing quality that matched his serpentine appearance. You have led us on quite a chase. But the hunt ends here. Voreth Keln, the queen said. And there was recognition in her voice. I should have known the hegemony would be behind this. Your masters have wanted me dead for centuries, and today they will have their wish. Mora said. He turned his attention to Yuna, his eyes narrowing with contempt. You may leave, human. This is not your fight. And my employers have no interest in starting a war with your species over one dead soldier. Thanks for the offer, Yuna said, not lowering her rifle. I think I will stay. Vareth made a gesture that might have been a shrug. Then you will die with her. It makes no difference to me. The Kethrani soldiers advanced. And Yuna opened fire. Her first 3 shots took down 2 soldiers before they could react. And the queen's pistol barked beside her as Alindris proved that 10,000 years of life had not dulled her combat skills. But they were hopelessly outnumbered. Yuna felt the impact before she registered the pain. A blade sliding between her ribs as a Kethrani soldier got inside her guard. She twisted away and put a bullet through his head. But the damage was done. Blood soaked through her uniform as she staggered back, her vision blurring at the edges. Yuna, the queen shouted. The human sergeant did not respond, could not respond, because another soldier was coming, and she had to keep fighting. She dropped 3 more before her rifle clicked empty. And then she drew her knife and kept going. The world narrowed to a tunnel of violence and desperation, each movement bringing fresh agony from the wound in her side. She killed 2 more with the knife before a blow from behind sent her crashing to the ground. Voreth Kelm stood over her, his blade raised for the killing stroke. Brave, he admitted. Stupid but brave. He brought the blade down, and Yuna closed her eyes. The blow never landed. A burst of energy tore through Vareth's chest, and he stumbled back with a look of shock on his reptilian face. Behind him, Queen Alindris stood with something that had not been there before. A staff of crystalline light that hummed with ancient power. You forgot something, Kelm, the queen said. This temple belongs to my people, and it remembers us. She gestured, and the walls themselves came alive. Stone guardians pulled themselves from the murals, constructs of rock and light that fell upon the remaining Kethrani with terrible efficiency. Voreth managed to escape, fleeing into the depths of the temple with the few soldiers who survived the onslaught. The rest were not so fortunate when it was over. Alindris dropped the staff and rushed to Yuna's side. The human was still breathing, but barely, and the blood pooling beneath her spoke to how little time remained. Why? The queen demanded, pressing her hands against the wound. Why did you take that blade from me? Humans heal slowly. I could have survived that strike. Yuna's eyes flickered open, and she managed something that might have been a smile. You are the queen, she whispered. Your people need you, and yours need you. They will survive. Yuna said, they always do. Her eyes closed, and Alindris felt something crack inside her chest. It was not the neural link, not the bond she shared with her people across the stars. It was something older and simpler and far more painful. It was grief for someone she had only known for a single night. Someone who had carried her through darkness and fought for her without asking anything in return. No, the Queen said, "You do not get to die, not for me." Not like this. She reached for the Staff of Light and began to channel its power into the broken human before her. The temple's ancient systems hummed to life. And somewhere in the distance, rescue ships broke through the atmosphere. Help was coming. Galindris prayed it would arrive in time. The smoke rose thick and black from the burning wreckage of the Sylvari convoy, and Sergeant Unibeak pressed her back against a shattered transport vehicle, while plasma fire screamed overhead. She had seen ambush before, but nothing like this. The Kathrani raiders had struck without warning, dropping from the sky in sleek black gunships that tore through the convoy's defensive shields like paper now. The diplomatic zone of Vareth X looked like a war zone, with bodies scattered across the scorched earth, and the screams of the dying filling the arena. Checked her rifle and counted her remaining ammunition. 12 rounds, not nearly enough. Her comm unit crackled with static, and she knew her team was gone. She had watched Corporal Juan fall in the first volley, and Private Santos had been cut down while trying to reach cover. She was alone now, surrounded by enemies who wanted everyone dead. Kathrani were not taking prisoners today. She moved low and fast through the debris field, her training taking over as her mind processed the situation. The convoy had been carrying Queen Alindris of the Sylvari, one of the most powerful rulers in the known galaxy. The Sylvari were ancient beings, insectoid in form but graceful beyond measure, and they had ruled their corner of space for longer than humanity had existed as a species. Queen Alindris herself was said to be over 10,000 years old, a living legend who viewed humans as little more than evolutionary accidents stumbling through the cosmos. Una had met her once, briefly, during a diplomatic function 3 months ago. The Queen had looked at her with those compound eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, and she had said nothing. The silence had spoken volumes. Humans were beneath her. Notice now. Una heard weapons fire from the far side of the wreckage, and she moved toward it without thinking. She told herself it was tactical awareness, that she needed to know where the enemy was concentrated. But something deeper drove her forward. Some instinct that refused to let her simply run for safety while others died. She found the Queen's personal guards first, or what remained of them. Elite Sylvari warriors lay broken across the ground, their beautiful armor shattered, their bioluminescent blood pooling in strange patterns that seemed almost artistic in their tragedy. They had fought hard. That much was clear, but the Kathrani had brought overwhelming force, and even the finest warriors in the queendom had not been enough. Una moved past them with a soldier's detachment, noting their positions, honoring their sacrifice with a moment of silent respect. Then she saw the Queen Alindris lay crumpled against a fallen pillar, her elegant form twisted at angles that spoke of terrible damage. Her exoskeleton was cracked in multiple places, and that same luminescent blood seeped from wounds across her body. She was still breathing. Una could see, but barely. The Queen's compound eyes flickered with fading light, and her mandibles moved weakly, as if trying to form words. Una dropped to one knee beside her, checking for immediate threats before turning her attention to the wounded monarch up close. Alindris was both beautiful and alien in ways that human words struggled to capture. Her form suggested something between a mantis and a wasp, but refined over millions of years into something almost divine, even dying. She carried an aura of ancient power that made Una feel like a child standing before a force of nature. "Human," the Queen whispered, and her voice carried harmonics that resonated in Una's chest. "Why are you here?" "Checking for survivors," Una said, already assessing the wounds with practiced eyes. "Can you move?" The queen made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. My guards are dead. My ship is destroyed, and assassins hunt me through the ruins of what should have been neutral ground. She said, moving seems rather pointless. Moving means living. Yuna said, staying means dying. She could hear the Kethrani search parties working through the wreckage, their harsh voices calling to each other as they hunted for survivors. They would find this position within minutes. You should run. Human, Alindri said, your species is not the target here, and there is no reason for you to die for a queen who is not your own. Yuna looked at the ancient monarch, this being who had dismissed her entire species as accidents of evolution, who had ruled worlds before humanity discovered fire. She thought about her training, about the tactical reality of the situation, about the simple mathematics of survival that said she should leave this dying alien and save herself. Then she thought about her brother Junho, who had died 3 years ago in a battle that had nothing to do with him, protecting colonists he had never met. He had not run either. Can you hold on to my shoulders? Yuna asked, slinging her rifle across her back. The queen stared at her with those ancient eyes, confusion replacing the resignation that had been there moments before. What are you doing? Something stupid. Yuna admitted. She positioned herself and lifted, grunting with the effort as the queen's weight settled across her back. Alindris was lighter than she looked, her form built for efficiency rather than mass. But the strain was still significant. This is foolish, the queen protested weakly. Your species heals slowly, and you will die carrying me through hostile territory. Maybe, Yuna agreed, adjusting her grip and starting to move, but not today. She carried the queen into the forest that bordered the crash site, moving as quickly as the burden would allow behind her. She heard the Kethrani reach the position where Alindris had fallen, heard their angry shouts as they realized their primary target had escaped. They would follow. Yuna knew they would follow, and she knew the odds were against her reaching safety before they caught up, but she had made her choice, and she would see it through. The queen stirred against her back, her voice weak but carrying a note of genuine curiosity. Why? Alindris asked. I have given you no reason for loyalty. Human, and my people have offered yours nothing but condescension since you emerged into the galactic community. You were dying, Yuna said simply, and I was not. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. They moved deeper into the forest as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. The queen fell silent, perhaps conserving her strength, or perhaps simply unable to comprehend the creature carrying her toward uncertain safety. Yuna did not try to explain further. Some things could not be explained, only demonstrated behind them. The hunt began for any trackers spread into the forest, their technology and their numbers giving them every advantage. Before them lay miles of hostile terrain, with no guarantee of rescue and no promise of survival. Yuna kept walking. The queen needed carrying, and she was the only one left to do it. That was enough. It had to be enough. The forest of Vareth Ix was not meant for humans. The trees rose hundreds of meters into the sky, their trunks wide enough to hold buildings, their canopy so thick that barely any light reached the ground. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness, calls and cries from creatures that evolution had shaped for this world, and this world alone. Yuna moved through it anyway. The queen's weight, a constant reminder of why she could not stop. 3 hours had passed since the ambush, and every muscle in her body screamed for rest. She ignored the pain and kept walking. The Kethrani were still behind them. She knew she could hear their search parties in the distance, the hum of their scanning equipment and the occasional bark of commands in their harsh language. They were being methodical, which meant they were confident. They believed they had all the time in the world to find their prey. Yuna intended to prove them wrong. She found a cave system as the last light faded from the sky, a network of tunnels carved into the base of one of the massive trees. The entrance was hidden by thick undergrowth, and she had to set the queen down to clear a path when she turned back. She found Alindris watching her with those compound eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. "You should leave me here," the queen said. Her voice was stronger than before, but Una could hear the pain beneath the words. "The caves will hide me for a time, and you could move faster alone." "And when the Kethrani find this place?" Una asked, lifting the queen once more. "You cannot fight in your condition. I have lived for 10,000 years. Alindri said, "Perhaps that is long enough." Una did not dignify that with a response. She carried the queen into the cave and found a chamber deep enough to risk a small light when she sat Alindri's down against the stone wall. She finally got a good look at the extent of the injuries. They were worse than she had thought. The cracks in the queen's exoskeleton ran deep, and several of them were leaking that strange luminescent fluid at a rate that worried her. Silvari biology was different from human, but blood loss was blood loss in any species. "I need to treat these wounds," Una said, pulling her field medical kit from her pack. The queen made a dismissive gesture with one of her upper limbs. "Human medicine will not work on my kind," she said. "Our physiologies are too different. The principles are the same." Una said, "Stop the bleeding, prevent infection, stabilize the patient." She began working before the queen could protest further, cleaning the wounds with antiseptic and applying pressure to the worst of the leaks. Alindris hissed in discomfort but did not pull away. "Barbaric," the queen muttered, "but effective." Una replied. They sat in silence as Una worked. The only sounds the distant drip of water and the occasional rumble of Kethrani ships passing overhead when the worst wounds were treated. Una allowed herself a moment to rest, leaning back against the cave wall with her rifle across her knees. "You lost someone," Alindris said suddenly. Una looked at her, surprised by the observation. "In the ambush," the queen continued, "I saw bodies in human uniforms near the crash site. My team," Una confirmed, Corporal Juan and Private Santos. "They were good soldiers, and yet you grieve for them while carrying a queen who treated you with contempt," Alindri said. "That seems illogical." Una was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "My brother died 3 years ago," she finally said. "He was a medic attached to a colonial defense unit, and when raiders hit his station, he stayed behind to evacuate the wounded instead of running for the shelters. He died. He saved 47 people before they killed him," Una said. "And when they gave him his medal, my mother asked me if it was worth it." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that Junho did not think about worth when he made his choice," Una said. "He saw people who needed help, and he helped them. That was who he was." The queen was silent for a long moment, her compound eyes fixed on the human with an expression that was difficult to read. "And that is who you are as well," she finally said. "Perhaps," Una admitted, "or perhaps I am just too stubborn to know when to quit." A sound from outside made them both freeze. The crunch of footsteps on fallen leaves. Una killed the light and raised her rifle, her heart pounding as she waited in the darkness. The footsteps passed by the hidden entrance without stopping, and slowly the sound faded into the distance. They stayed silent for several minutes after, neither willing to risk making noise until they were certain the danger had passed. "My wounds are worse than they appear," the queen finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My species shares a neural link with our people, a connection that binds us across the stars. And I am the center of that web for the entire queendom." "What does that mean?" "It means that if I die, millions of my people will feel it," Alindri said. "The shock will spread through the link like fire through dry grass, and the panic and grief will destabilize worlds." Una absorbed this information in silence. The stakes had just gotten much higher. "Then we make sure you do not die," she said simply. The queen made that sound again, the one that might have been laughter. "You say that as if it is easy." I say it as if it is necessary. Yuna corrected. Easy has nothing to do with it. She checked her rifle and then checked the entrance to the cave. The Kathrani patrols were getting closer, and they would need to move soon if they wanted to stay ahead of the search. There's an old temple complex about 10 kilometers north of here, Alendri said. My people built it long ago as a sanctuary, and there may be communication equipment we can use to call for help. Can you make it that far? I do not know, the queen admitted, but I do not believe we have a choice. Yuna nodded and moved to lift the queen once more before she could. Alindris caught her arm with surprising strength. Why are you doing this? The queen asked again. The truth this time. Not platitudes about necessity. Yuna met those ancient eyes and saw something there she had not seen before, genuine curiosity. Perhaps even respect. Because when my brother died, the people he saved promised to honor his memory by helping others, she said. I made the same promise, and I intend to keep it. She lifted the queen and started toward the cave entrance behind them. The hunt continued before them. 10 kilometers of hostile forest waited in the darkness, but they were not dead yet. And as long as they lived, there was hope. Yuna carried that hope on her shoulders alongside the queen, and she refused to let either one fall.